And now I'm going to pass the baton to Senator Feldman, who will tell us about his legislative priorities. And I'll give you a heads up when 5 minutes is elapsed.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, Kathy, to the caucus for an invite. And let me just sort of, with my limited 5 minutes here, in terms of objectives, so I chair one of the four standing committees, in the Senate. We have four committees in the Senate. There are now seven committees in the House. And my committee has, I think, the broadest jurisdiction of any committee in the General Assembly. We had more bills each of the last two sessions than any other committee in the General Assembly. So the name of the committee is Education, Energy, and the Environment. So education policy, K through 12 and higher ed, energy policy. We're talking data centers, AI, anything involving renewable energy, and the environment, environmental policy as well. But beyond that, we also have jurisdiction over affordable housing, election law, and a lot more. And so that's going to be a dominant topic for myself, trying to navigate and quarterback somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 bills will come into the General Assembly, likely again this session. Of those, about 500 bills make their way to my committee. It's important to point out at the outset, the House of Delegates, and I'll let my three colleagues talk about it, has undergone a major facelift, which has major implications for my committee. Um, During the rest of this term, literally, I've been dealing with five of the six standing committees. My committee feeds bills and shares jurisdiction with five of the six standing committees in the Senate, in the House. Now they've added a seventh committee and they've shifted jurisdiction around. And so that, again, who the chairs of the committees I'll be dealing with is changed pretty dramatically. I will say that the new Speaker of the House, uh, formerly Chair Jocelyn Pena-Melnick, now Speaker Pena-Melnick, is somebody I know well. I actually co-chaired a commission with her for 5 to 6 years, something called the Insurance Coverage Protection Commission, which dealt with health insurance and healthcare. And so I think she's going to make a great speaker. On the energy policy front, beyond chairing the standing committee, I actually am the national chair of a NCSL task force, which deals with energy policy, data centers, and the like. And I had occasion, actually, Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo is a new member of that task force. We spent a couple of days on Capitol Hill last month talking about issues on energy policy that literally all 50 states are dealing with the same set of issues. I want to give a shout out to my three colleagues who are doing a great job. Each and every one of them now is the chair of a subcommittee. I'll let them talk about that, and on issues that actually have implications for my Senate committee. And then I will also say that we're looking ahead to bringing back as much money as possible home in capital projects. Each of the last 2 years, we've brought back record amounts of money. Last year, it was from BlackRock in Germantown to Riverworks in Poolsville. And I think we're going to hopefully match the success of the last few sessions. But the team as a whole is gelling beautifully. As far as big picture items, I know, Andrew, I'm running out of my 5 minutes. The budget's going to be a big issue. We're coming back facing a shortfall of about $1.5 billion. We're going to have to deal with that. I'm going to have to deal with education policy in my committee, which deals with the blueprint for Maryland, the biggest investment in K through 12 education in the history of our state, and arguably the biggest investment of any state in the nation. My committee deals with that topic. We can talk a little more higher ed. I mentioned earlier data centers, environmental issues. We're going to deal with everything from PFAS to the building energy performance standards, affordable housing, another hot topic. The governor is going to bring in a bill. We are going to have some bills from some legislators and special elections. Delegate Foley has a bill that's going to change the way we how we do legislative vacancies. And my vice chair is Cheryl Kagan from Montgomery. She'll have the cross file of Delegate Foley's bill. Some other big issues before I run out of time. Outside of my committee, I'll be working with Chair Corman on metro funding. The DC metro system is in great duress, and we have collaborated, myself, Malcolm Augustine, and Chair Corman, with trying to get additional funding for our metro system. Then there will be the broader issue of how do we deal with all the changes in DC and law. We're dealing in the budget side of things with huge cuts to our federal workforce, federal contracting work, grant money, The implications of what's happening in DC are profound on our state. We can talk about that. And then there'll be a lot of issues, immigration, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm getting a little bit of a nod from Andrew here, but it's my committee. It's beyond my committee. It's the what's happening in DC, how we're going to respond. And it's an election year. So all these difficult issues are in front of us. So I really look forward to the Q&A. And with that, Andrew, I'm going to pass it on to Delegate David Fraser-Hidalgo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So a quick just for housekeeping purposes, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you to all the District 15 caucus members and everybody that's worked to organize us and get us here. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, so thank you. So a couple of things, just a big thank you also to my team because we do great work together, and to just kind of dive into where a couple of big pieces that I think are important. We do have a new speaker, so for the first time in 5 years, we have a new speaker. And as you have probably heard, she is off to the races, as they say. A lot of changes have happened, and a lot of challenges ahead of us. I will say, from my own selfish perspective, as far as changes are concerned, I served for 9 years on the Environment and Transportation Committee, and I really wanted to work on energy policy and business policy. So I got over to Economic Matters, and I was on Economic Matters for 3 years. And one of the greatest things about being on Economic Matters is sitting right next to me was Lily Chi. And we had so much fun on that committee doing good work, but just, getting our stuff done and trying to do it with the lightheartedness, smile and joke every once in a while, which can be very, very difficult. So with that said, fortunately and unfortunately, I am moving back to Environment and Transportation Committee after 3 years. And the reason I'm doing that is because the speaker is moving all the energy policy from economic matters to environment and transportation. And luckily, she's given me the honor of being able to chair that subcommittee. And being that energy is a big passion of mine, one of the biggest passions in the General Assembly, and given the timeliness of energy, data centers, all of that work needing to be done, I thought that that was clearly a really wonderful opportunity for me. So off I go back to ENT, which I'll be serving for. I'll be serving back on ENT. And now I'll be with Delegate Foley. So if they put me next to Delegate Foley, then she'll probably get the same treatment that Delegate Chi got, with a lot of little quiet comments and jokes to make light of some of the really heavy subject matter. So the big thing that I'm going to be dealing with really is just energy, right? So we have a big energy issue. It's great that I'm staying on that subject matter because that subject matter still goes back to Senator Feldman or Chair Feldman on Triple E. So excited to be continuing to work with Senator Feldman, and now I'll be working with Delegate Foley as well as Delegate Chi on energy issues. Like, the energy issues are huge for the state, right? There's a lot we have to do. We have to create and find ways to generate more electricity, but what's even more, we have to find ways of storing electricity for dispatching the electricity at a later time. That's kind of a big secret here. Generation is important in Maryland. It's vitally important, but so is storage. Storage is in some ways is even more important, you could argue. So there's a lot of challenges moving forward. The big piece from the speaker's office that she mentioned to me multiple times directly is the ability of it being affordable. So we have to look at renewables, which are the cheapest now, the fastest dispatchable energy generation and storage that we have for all of our end users. But we have to find a way to do it affordably. And the costs have been going up for a variety of reasons, which we can have a conversation about, but it's a lot of very complicated reasons which energy costs have been going up. And most of those reasons don't have anything to do with us here in the General Assembly. They have to do with the rising cost of natural gas, which is in large part due to the exportation of natural gas by the Trump administration, which has driven up gas prices almost double. So between that and a bunch of other issues, that's kind of where we are. And I'm happy to answer more questions. I know there's some questions about it. And lastly, I'll say, with a $1.5 billion budget shortfall, we have a lot of big challenges ahead of us. We've lost, I think it's over 15,000 federal jobs in the state of Maryland. That's more jobs than any state in the union, not per capita, but just purely, even though Maryland is only 6.2 million people, we've lost over 15,000 federal jobs. That doesn't include consultants. That doesn't include all the ancillary mom and pop shops and restaurants that aren't being visited anymore. So we have a great deal of challenges ahead, and we're going to continue to do the best we can to push forward in the most positive way we can to address those challenges. And with that said, my time is probably about up. Is that correct, Andrew?
Yeah, you got about 40 seconds.
40 seconds. I'll go ahead and pass it to my good friend Delegate Chi to follow up. I will yield my 40 seconds to her.
Thank you very much. Delegate Chi, I'll give you 5 minutes and 40 seconds.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. I'm glad today does not fall on January 6th. For some reason, I like January 5th much better. So thanks for organizing us. I can't believe it's already 2026. Um, Looking ahead to this new session, on the one hand, we have a lot of exciting changes. On the other hand, it's another hugely challenging budget year, probably even worse than last year, especially because of the outlook, which is every year we can expect at least a billion or more budget shortfall to be added to the existing budget shortfall. So we're talking about not only 1.5 billion shortfall this fiscal 27, but also going to be growing to like a 5 billion by 2020 by 2030 or something. So this is no laughing matter. And each one of us will have to, probably vote for some cost cutting across the board if we haven't done enough last session. This is the time to tighten the belt for all aspects of our government operations. So whoever serves on appropriations committee, I really don't envy them. But also keep this in mind as we advocate for our district needs and Montgomery County needs. But I have to always put in a plug, which is this is the great time to talk about how we can grow our economy more aggressively, right? So that we don't have to fall into that raising tax kind of tactic again, because businesses and residents are also struggling. So I have been appointed by the new speaker as the chair of the newly minted Economic Development Subcommittee as part of the Standing Committee of Economic Matters. I am sad to lose my good buddy DFH. When he was talking about, the part about the best part of serving at ECM, and I was waiting for him to say that is to serve with Delegate Lily Chi, and he got the answer right. So you passed. um, uh, so I know, today, for example, the governor's office already reached out to me saying they want to reintroduce the Governor's Decade Act, which is a very aggressive, comprehensive set of programs that he wants to roll out related to boosting Maryland's economy. And I hope it gets to be assigned to my economic development subcommittee so we can really work it out with him and pass it because he introduced last year and it did not move. Hopefully this year we will give him the time of day to actually move forward on this Decade Act. It focuses on growing some key industries and streamlining regulatory scheme and reevaluate all the incentive programs. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to highlight the several bills that I've been working on. I have several consumer protection bills this session because I serve on Economic Matters Committee. One of which is the AI therapy disclaimer bill, which several states, blue and red, have passed, which is to require AI developers and deployers using AI to put a disclaimer there so that if they deal with anything related to, the kind of work that social workers would do or counselors or psychologists or therapists would do, they will make it clear this is not a human interface because it has tremendous influence, especially on minors. Sometimes taking advice online and even to the point of taking their own lives and things like that. So this is a important consumer protection measure. Another one is named after the late Jack Fitzgerald, who was a great champion for consumers and consumer protection. This is about price transparency for car dealerships, having the right to put their real price that they want to sell at on their own website. It's named after him in his honor. Even though energy is no longer part of ECM portfolio, I am still going to introduce an energy bill this session that would require electric companies to adopt cost-cutting measures, cost containment measures, I should say, and incentivize the use of advanced technologies. They are required to provide that every 3 years to the Public Service Commission, which would have to approve that, but also require the companies to provide annual progress report. And I am also going to focus on a couple of small business friendly bills and the nonprofit hospital friendly bills to level the playing field. Whether or not they have a chance to pass, I don't know. These are difficult bills, one of which is the uh, PEO bill that my senator graciously filed last year, which is to allow small businesses under 50 employees to provide more affordable and competitive healthcare plans like larger employers. And the other is something called the independent labs. Montgomery County is home to many different biotech labs that are quite innovative and efficient in conducting tests, but they're locked out of the networks and the contracting opportunities because the market is dominated by MCOs, the managed care organizations. So that's an area we're looking into. And I'm also looking at how to help nonprofit hospitals so that they don't have to pay tax on the self-insurance plan. Finally, I am a passionate champion because I'm an Asian immigrant. I know a lot of my people don't vote in primaries, so I feel very strongly. I wrote an op-ed in Baltimore Sun making a very forceful argument about why we need to open up the primaries in order to allow 1 million or so independent Maryland voters to have a meaningful say in elections that matter. So these are the ones I focus on, along with several others. Altogether, it's probably about a dozen bills this session, and I'm looking forward to your advocacy and your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, everybody from the District 15 caucus for sponsoring this and putting this all together. Just to follow up on a couple of comments that were made by Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo, we are going to be doing some new business in the Environment and Transportation Committee that centers around energy. And as a part of that, the speaker appointed me to be chair of a subcommittee on utilities, but not non-energy utilities. So Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo's committee will be dealing with all the energy utilities, and I'll be dealing with the other utilities, such as water, sewer, transportation infrastructure, think Uber, Lyft, and as well as broadband and telecommunications. So, I think that'll be a little bit of a new area for me, but I think it'll be very interesting, and I look forward to working with Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo on all of these utility issues. I should mention that Mark Corman from District 16 here in Montgomery County is the chair of the Environment and Transportation Committee. So I think that's all a really good fit. And as has been mentioned, the budget will be a huge part of our work in this session because we are facing the $1.5 billion deficit, and we do have to figure that out. So that will be important work that we all work on. As for my own bills, I just want to spend a couple minutes mentioning a couple of them. I do have a broadband bill that I'm bringing coincidentally. I put it in drafting before I knew I was going to chair this subcommittee that would shift some of the responsibility for broadband regulation, monitoring, and upkeep to the Public Service Commission here in Maryland. Because the federal government, one, because we're now allowed to do that, because there's been a court ruling, and two, because the FCC, which oversees broadband at the federal level, is a mess. So I'm bringing that bill, and we'll see what happens with that. I also have a crosswalk bill that would allow Montgomery County to install cameras at crosswalks in school zones to make them safer so that, like speed cameras, but they would be for crosswalks. I have that bill. I have, as Senator Feldman mentioned, I am putting in again the special elections bill to fill vacancies in the General Assembly. I'm hopeful that that passes this time. I have a couple of others. Senator Feldman and I are looking at possibly putting in a bill to require basic fire safety measures in short-term rentals. There's a family in Montgomery County that suffered a terrible tragedy when they were on vacation in New York. because the short-term rental that they had did not have adequate smoke detectors, and two members of their family died. I also have a hate bias bill to require school systems to put on their website incidences involving hate bias by victim group, anti-Semitism, anti-LGBTQ, etc. I have that bill. And I'm also looking at a bill, again, with Senator Feldman. We've both been working on it to allow to change the regulations at the Department of the Environment to allow for carbon dioxide reduction systems, which are basically a carbon vault where you capture the carbon that's released from organic material and you turn that into energy. And our regulations, as they currently stand, do not allow for that. So we're looking at a way to do that. I have a couple of media bills to help bolster local media that I can go into more detail if people are interested in the Q&A. And I have my collective bargaining bills for collective bargaining unionization at the University of Maryland for graduate assistants and for non-tenured faculty. I have a few more bills, but I think I am almost at the end of my time. And I just want to say that, a couple of both my colleagues have mentioned the new leadership in the House. I'm very excited about Speaker Pena Melnick taking the gavel. Her life experience is incredible. She was born literally in a shack in the Dominican Republic. So she's coming in, she's an immigrant. She has been chair of the Health and Government Operations Committee, did a fantastic job there. The perspective she brings as a real person facing real issues, I think will serve us all really well. And I'm very excited about her leadership going forward. So thanks. I look forward to your questions. I just want to say, reiterate what David Fraser-Hidalgo said, which is that we have a great team here in District 15. And I always look forward to getting to Annapolis with these three other leaders and working to make our district even better. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate the opening statements there. We're going to dive into some of the pre-submitted questions. If folks have questions that they don't hear me ask, and that is the timer going off right there. If folks have questions that they don't hear me ask, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to them at the end. I know I have a number of questions that have arisen just from the opening statements. That'll go at the very end. I have been told we have 2-minute responses for these questions. That's going to be sort of softly enforced. So if you go over that, I'll give you to the extent that it's visible, I will give you this 30 seconds when you have 30 seconds, time when we're at time. And if you go over it by 30 seconds, I'll just stop you. So I'm gonna be gentle with it, but we're having 2-minute responses to questions. With that, I'm going to dive in. The first topic that we wanted to talk about tonight was the budget. We had a number of people reach out in light of the budget crisis, which a number of you mentioned. We do have a shortfall, as I think we all understand, in the budget that because we are a state and our state constitution mandates that we balance our budget every year, we're going to have to address the challenges that proposes or that poses for us. So a lot of folks reached out to ask about specific priorities and hoping that specific priorities remain your priorities as well. So I'm just going to read through 3 of them that are just, priorities that folks asked about. And if anyone wants to start, anyone feels so compelled, feel free. Otherwise, I'll jump in and I will pick one of you at random, since this is something that you'll all have to address in some way or another, but doesn't really fall in the jurisdiction of any of your committees in the way that it would of some other legislators. But we had a question about funding for arts and early childhood education. We had a question about funding for senior citizens and funding for disabled Marylanders. Someone who had a concern about how that was how funding was proposed last budget cycle. So with regards to those 3 issues, with regards to other issues, how do you see the state tackling the budget crisis?
I nominate Brian to answer that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so one thing is the governor has come out, and I think both presiding officers have made the point that in this year, election year, we are not going to raise taxes. And so this is going to be a belt tightening session. There's just no way around it. And that presents, I think, some challenging trade-offs that we're going to have to. I think you mentioned, Andrew, the DDA funding for disability. Last year, that was a hot issue. And I will say the advocates came down and rallied on Lawyers Mall, and there was an original cut in the governor's proposed budget, which we haven't seen yet. I mean, this all starts with the governor. And as you point out, we have to have it, unlike Capitol Hill, we can't print money. We can't leave Annapolis unless we have a balanced budget. Last year, there was $400 million proposed cuts. We were able to claw back 300 million of it. So the damage was not nearly what was in the original proposal. This year, I would say some of the challenges I mentioned earlier, I am the committee of jurisdiction on the blueprint, which when you get past this year is a major driver of future deficits. We talked about billion and a half this year. If we do nothing right now, we could be looking at a $3 billion shortfall in FY28 and a $4 billion shortfall in 2030. And so I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis on belt tightening efficiencies and whether it's education, healthcare. Don't forget, because of the actions of the federal government, we have a huge swath of our populace, whether it's eligibility requirements for Medicaid, the expiration of the premium tax credits. This could send people onto the uninsured rolls that we would like to be able to backfill. So if it's healthcare, I would say DDA funding and the blueprint to me are three areas that I think are vulnerable, and yet I'm hoping we can figure out a way to protect that because those, represent exactly what our priorities are as a state. And so with that, I got the blue card and I'll pass it on to my colleagues to add some more meat on the bone.
Well, I'll just say that, everything that Senator Feldman said, and um, uh, you know, uh, there are going to be, there is going to be belt tightening, and that means that, some programs are either not going to get funded or for this year, or the funding is going to be cut, and we just have to deal with that. And it's not going to be easy, but that's what we're there for. But we also need understanding on the part of our constituents that that's what we're dealing with. If you don't want us to raise taxes, and we don't want to raise taxes, uh, then that's our only choice. And we will make the best decisions that we can make in those circumstances. And I would just say this that Senator Feldman mentioned the cuts to healthcare at the federal level with Medicaid and so forth. What I always tell people is, look, we will do what we do with humanity and not with cruelty. And I think that's the big difference between us and the federal government. We're not going to act, cruelly to people. We're going to try to do it in the best way possible. And I think in the House, our new speaker certainly recognizes that. She's been dealing with these issues with respect to Medicaid and disability payments and all of that. That has been her bailiwick. She knows how important all of those programs are. So I just, I hate to say trust us, but I want to put it out there that trust that we're doing the best that we can and that we're coming to it from a point of we're trying to protect Marylanders from all of these things that are happening around us.
Thank you so much. I don't know if David or Lily, you want to chime in on this one. If not, no worries. We can catch you on the next one.
Hey, Andrew, can I
That's
just
certainly,
could I
yes.
supplement? I will say because this goes maybe to Lily's subcommittee. You know, one of the things I think, and back on the taxes, the temptation to raise taxes puts us at a competitive disadvantage economically with other states. And, growing the state economy ultimately, is a key. You grow the pie, you grow the tax base, you can solve a lot of our budget problems. So we have to be careful not to do harm to our economy. Brooke Learman, our comptroller, has written several reports now talking about how our economy is stagnant in the state of Maryland relative to some of our neighboring jurisdictions and nationally. And so I'm hopeful that Delegate Lily Chi's Economic Development Subcommittee is going to come up with the magic sauce, grow that state economy, grow our tax revenue, and then Everything's going to be good.
Of course, we have the magic sauce. Well, since you mentioned the tax, I have to chime in here. Uh, from what I read, part of the reason, besides the federal's brutal actions of funding cuts and jobs cuts that disproportionately affect Maryland, right? Another issue we're facing, and people can accuse us about, overspending on blueprint and all of that. And I know the blueprint issue is also going to be on the table to be discussed this session. One thing we cannot ignore is the fact that the corporate income, the commercial tax base, is not delivering as much as we thought it would. Okay. So this is an absolutely wrong time to go the other direction by raising tax rate or raising tax in the short term, because the more you do that, the more you drive away businesses that could deliver the commercial tax base. So we really have to be disciplined in our approach on that.
Thank you very much. I'll jump in with another budget question that was a late submission one, but fits in the vein and is also something that is of interest, I think, to everybody here. And that is energy rates. I know that is something that has in previous years, not that it fills the budget, the holes in the budget, but in previous years, costs for energy rates have gone up, and so even when taxes may not have gone up, that's been another impact on the bottom line for a lot of Marylanders. Are there efforts that are being considered in the General Assembly this year to rein in the rising cost of energy?
Do you want to go, Brian, or do you want me to go?
Well, why don't you take the lead and I'll do some follow-up. Why don't you take a shot at this?
Yeah, so I mean that is, I think, as far as energy is concerned, the speaker's the big priority is to exactly that. And I think it's we've done a lot in the last few years on ECM, but there's a lot more that I think that we're gonna need to do to kind of rein in those rates. I will tell you one of the big cost drivers for energy right now is the backfill of the PJM and how they measure storage. And so that's been very difficult. And I think there are some opportunities there. There's also what we call the SEIF, the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, which has, I think, close to about $1 billion in it right now, and how we can kind of leverage that to diversify our energy portfolio when it comes to generation and storage. So there are some opportunities that we're going to have to take advantage of. Also, how the utilities themselves, the BG&Es and Potomac Edisons and Pepco's work, and also again with the PJM, I know they're slowly digging out of a very, very long backlog, which is causing a lot of issues with us. There's also the data center piece, which is also a big piece when it comes to data centers. If a company's thinking about putting up a data center and they apply for 3 or 4 or 5 different kind of permits that or projects that go to the PJM for review, but they're only thinking that they're going to do actually one, but they've applied for 6. All of a sudden, the PJM, maybe not knowing that there are 4 or 5 of those projects aren't actually moving forward, or 2 or 3 of those projects aren't moving forward, are making certain calculations based on that. So, um, um, yeah, there's going to be a lot of pieces that we're going to have to work toward. And again, I'll say I'm super excited because a lot of that work we'll be doing directly with the chair of Triple E. So, yay.
Well, this is a hot issue, but it's a complicated issue. And so let me just say, Andrew, a couple things. When you look about your energy bill, it's actually not one bill. There's component parts, and people don't fully appreciate it. I mean, fundamentally, we have the demand for energy is accelerating, increasing dramatically because now we drive electric vehicles. We're electrifying our houses. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you throw in data center world in which demand for energy is going, and supply has been stagnant. It's like economics 101, right? Demand is going this way, supply is stagnant. The other thing is we're part of a 13-state grid. We're not on some island, and people don't fully appreciate that. But right now, we do not generate enough energy. 40% of the energy we consume in Maryland, we have to bring in from other states. How does it get here? It has to get here through transmission lines. Who pays for the transmission lines? Marylanders. And by the way, our infrastructure on transmission lines is very antiquated. So upgrading those costs money. Energy costs are going up. PJM, the 13th state grid operator, has these markets, and the energy is increased. So the cost of energy has increased because demand has increased. But on top of that, for those states like ours that aren't producing enough in-state generation of energy, we pay a price for bringing energy in. And so the governor has issued an executive order, a very comprehensive one. We in the General Assembly passed some very comprehensive bills last session to incentivize new generation in our state. So we don't need to have as many transmission lines. And I think collectively and then the other issue is siting and permitting. I think Dave mentioned there's all these projects that have been approved in the PJM grid that are ready to roll. However, because of permitting and siting, Maryland has some of the most difficult permitting and zoning laws in the nation to locate energy projects. So we passed a bill to try to streamline some of that as well. So it's multifaceted, but the approach moving forward has got to be all hands on deck, and all the tools in the toolbox have to be deployed. So the governor has an executive order. We had some legislation, one of which we had to override. A veto, and we're going to have some meetings to try to put all that together with, one big comprehensive plan, with the end game being to protect Maryland ratepayers and generate more energy in state. And so, again, it is a complicated issue, and we can talk a little more about it. Data centers, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you, Andrew, for that
Thank
leniency.
you so
I thought you were
much.
going to shut me down there, but you didn't do so. So thank you.
Nope.
We can
No, I
talk as long
appreciate
as
it.
you want to talk about it. We
Yeah,
can
no,
spend the rest of the
well, I
night
appreciate
talking
you.
about it.
I appreciate you touching on the question. I did jump a little bit ahead of myself because energy is a topic that comes up later, and data centers is its whole subject. There were a number of questions submitted about data centers, so we will get to that as well a little bit later down the line. But since several people had mentioned tax hikes, I thought talking about the rate hikes was also something that fit in line with the subject there. The last question that we had submitted that was related to the budget, or at least related to spending, was more about the capital improvements budget, and what capital projects in District 15 are in the lineup for this year, if you already have a sense of that. And again, anyone can answer that because as I understand, most of these are a
Well,
team
I
effort.
will. I make a broad point. The last 2 years, I mean, we have done unbelievably well as a team here. I mean, literally last session, we got 100%, literally 100% of the money we asked for in Annapolis, we got. And it's a wide variety of projects. The entire district was represented by the projects. And actually, I would say that the last 2 years, we have not sat down as a team. What we do is we get the project requests in, and then we sit down as a team and prioritize. And we haven't done that yet. So I'll let my teammates weigh in, but we haven't had that conversation, nor have we actually received all the requests that we might get for various capital projects. But hopefully we can duplicate what we've done each of the last 2, 3 years on that front.
The only
I
thing that
agree.
I would add is just, I'm sorry, Lily, did you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Is while we have done very, very well, we want to kind of temper this by saying, as we continue to go into some of these budget shortfalls, we're going to do the best we can. I know we have some of the usual projects that have been partially funded that need to continue to be funded, plus some new projects. But I think, Senator Feldman said it very, very well. We have done extraordinarily well for the district. Really like knock it out of the park compared to a lot of the other districts around the state. And so I anticipate, comparatively speaking, I don't know where we'll be, but compared to other districts, I suspect that we'll still continue to have a significant amount of juice level to get more than our fair share, which is one of our big part of our jobs. So I make no apologies for it.
I agree. I think we have done very well, not only in aggregate numbers, but in terms of the diversity of projects we were able to fund across our very vast district, from Potomac to Poolesville to Germantown to Gaithersburg, the unincorporated area that are in our areas in our district, and Germantown, Soccerplex and the Arts Center, etc. And this year, I think at least the Clarksburg Yard is probably going to be on the list, but depends on whether they make the ask and how much they ask. A big kudos to our senator for always carry the water for the rest of us in fighting for the D15 budget. Um, we have been very blessed on that front.
Yeah. Two points I'd like to add to what my colleagues have said. One is that just so people understand, the capital budget is separate from the operating budget. And while we're tightening our belts everywhere, it does operate differently. So it's not like there's not going to be any money. It's just going to be, it's probably not going to be as robust as it has been in the past. Number one. Number two, I just want to reiterate what Delegate Chi just said about our senator, but also really about this whole team, the fact that we can work together and really figure out, what's a good way to get this money and what's the best way to approach the General Assembly, either on the Senate side or the House side, to get the capital budget money is something that we do because we work so well together as a team. And I just want to, reiterate that we have a great team here, and the fact that we work together really makes a big difference in something like the capital budget allocations.
Andrew, may I just very quickly, what Delegate Foley said cannot be understated. We know districts that got almost nothing because they can't get themselves together, they can't work together, whatever it may be. And so like it's like kind of the facts, the rules of the road, right? Like if you work well together, if you're all rowing in the same direction, if you're all doing good work, you have good reputations, then that's just the way the world works.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for touching on that. And thank you, for all the work that you do bringing money back to the district. I know I speak for myself, and I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say we appreciate it. We're going to move now into the next subject area, which was housing. Before I do that, I want to recognize two other elected officials that joined us, and this will be the last time I do this. So if I miss you in this time, just put something in the Q&A. But we are joined by Montgomery County Council member Marilyn Balcom, who is our council member here in District 2, which covers, I believe, most of District 15, at least the northern half of District 15 where I live. I think District 1, where Andrew Friedson is a council member, is the southern half of District 15. I think there's some overlap there still, although I don't know if that changed the last time there was redistricting. And then Will Roberts, who is the Democratic Central Committee member for District 15, or one of the two Democratic Central Committee members for District 15. So appreciate you both for being here as well. Now I'm going to dive into the next subject area. We had two questions about housing, and both of them can pretty much just be boiled down to what is the state doing to provide more affordable housing in Montgomery County. I don't know if anyone wants to take the lead on that, or I can just pick someone at random. I saw Linda unmute, so I'm going to go with you first.
Oh, that wasn't, I just did that. I mute because I have a cough and I don't want to keep coughing during. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to toss it to Senator Feldman, but let me just say that the responsibility for housing is now in Lily's committee. It used to be in the Environment and Transportation Committee. So they have switched. They put energy and utilities over in Environment, Transportation, and moved housing over to Economic Matters Committee. I'll just mention that the governor is coming in with a pretty big housing package, which I don't think we've seen yet. But I'm going to let Senator Feldman address it because his committee does deal with that issue.
Yeah, and it will come this year to the Economic Matters Committee. I will say, we've passed some bills the last couple of sessions. The challenge, well, first of all, here's some statistics. The governor uses about 100,000 units, housing units short. We are in Maryland, which is a problem. We are 43rd in the nation in terms of housing affordability, which is one thing. We're basically down about 40% in terms of new housing units from where we were pre-2008 financial crisis. So we're not anywhere even near to where we were pre-financial crisis. So there's a lot of work to be done. We had a bill from the governor that was in my committee last year and also in the Environment and Transportation Committee that the governor testified. One of the challenges, and let me say the answer is that there's going to be a mix of an executive order that the governor issued in September getting at this issue, and the governor's going to follow up with a piece of legislation. So I can give you a little heads up. But I will say one of the tensions last year was Maryland Association of Counties, called MACO. There's a tension where the state wants to tell the counties, this is what we want you to do. These are the targets we want you to meet, et cetera, et cetera. And the counties came back hard, including Montgomery County. Montgomery County came to my committee and testified in strong opposition to the governor's bill. And it ended up going to the Environment and Transportation Committee. It came back to my committee with a different title and a very different bill. And now the governor's gone back to the drawing board. So part of this is the Maryland Association of Counties going to be on board? Are they going to push back? Again, some of the strongest opposition came from our own county. But the governor in September issued an executive order, and here's kind of in a nutshell what it did. It directs state agencies to, number one, identify state-owned properties for transit-owned development. State permitting timelines are going to be reduced. Created a new housing ombudsman to coordinate these efforts. So the governor issued that executive order, and then he is going to come in, I think, with an ambitious piece of legislation dealing with state permitting, leveraging public land for new housing, statewide housing goals, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know yet what MACO's position is. And so that becomes a little bit of a political headache for a committee like mine where MACO. So this is a hot issue. We've lost a lot since 2008. Again, find 100,000 units and then doing it in a way where it's not the state jamming local prerogative and local zoning in a way that the locals find offensive. And so that's a bit of the challenge. But this is a hot issue. I think one of the hottest issues we'll deal with this session, no doubt.
Thank you. I didn't realize the jurisdiction changed on the House side, so I definitely want to go to Delegate Chi, Lily, if you want to speak about this as well.
Yeah, I'm actually excited that the Economic Matters Committee now will have a more traditional economic development portfolio that includes zoning, land use, and housing, which makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm looking forward to working on these issues. As the senator said, and Delegate Foley also mentioned, there had been good amount of progress in recent years at the state level in advancing affordable housing, especially workforce housing, in terms of turning vacant land and adding accessible dwelling units, allowing people to add those secondary homes and all of that. But just allowing, enabling counties or local jurisdictions to do something is one thing, right? The most important thing is the implementation part. And I think Montgomery County is sort of exhibit one in being in suffering from NIMBYism. And I think that community culture needs to change in order for laws to actually be implemented and make inroads on those things. We can't have communities up in arms when things happen in their backyard. We cannot have communities living in those big houses all come out and say we don't want townhouses or apartment buildings near where we live, right? We need more integration socioeconomically to make our communities work and be more inviting to the younger generations that we are cultivating, for our future workforce. So these are bigger conversations that's harder than passing laws, I have to tell you, or signing executive orders. But I have to also give a big shout out to my county council colleagues. I know Council Member Marilyn Balcom is a strong champion. And I know the county recently passed the More Housing Now Act, which is a huge step forward in terms of rezoning some major commercial corridors to allow missing middle housing to be built in the county, including duplexes, townhouses, and small apartments, and also to incentivize workforce housing and also convert some commercial units into housing units if we can make it work. I know politically it's not always popular. I have heard a criticism from some progressive part of the party saying, why are we incentivize developers? But at the end of the day, if the private sector doesn't want to play, then we're not going to have the kind of housing. The government just don't have the resources to build enough fast enough, right? To stabilize our communities. So we need to have these honest conversations and look ourselves in the mirror instead of pointing finger at other people and say, why don't you do more about affordable housing? It's easy to criticize. It's hard to actually look into ourselves and say, can we do more?
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to move now to the next subject, unless Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo or Delegate Foley, you want to jump in on housing. Otherwise, I can move along to the next one. Excellent. The next one, we had three questions that were submitted about redistricting and whether or not Maryland is going to join some of the other states that are considering redistricting the congressional maps. I know this is part of a broader national conversation. Several Republican states have done this. And California, I think, is one of and Virginia now are the Democratic states that have responded in kind. I understand there's some contention in the General Assembly as to whether or not that will occur. But we were asked multiple times about it, so I want to pass that question along to you. So if anyone wants to take the first bite at the apple, otherwise I will pick someone at random again. No one seems particularly excited. David, I'll start with you on the House side.
Ay, ay, ay. Um, I'm not sure how this is going to go with redistricting. I will say that this is what's going on in other parts of the country, and I feel like the idea that when they go low, we go high, that hasn't worked as well for the Democratic Party and democracy as a whole. It just hasn't worked very well for democracy. And while we continue to play by the rules, we lose seats. With that said, 7 out of 8 seats are already in Democratic hands in the state, and it's this is a very tough subject because you have the democracy or the fascism aspect of the conversation, but we have 7 out of 8 seats, and could we put ourselves accidentally in a position where we lose a seat and we go from 7 out of 8 to 6 out of 8, so a 6-2. I don't know whether that's possible, so I know there's a commission working on it. I am of the opinion we should look at it all very, very carefully, but I'm not sure where it's going to go. And I know that there's a little bit more appetite for it in the House than there is in the Senate, probably for some of those reasons and maybe more. I am not an attorney. I am not a specialist in this field, so I suspect that there are some other issues that are contributory issues as to why this may be very, very dangerous for the state to go down. And I guess I would either toss it to Lily because she's done a lot of work generally on elections, or Brian because he's in the Senate. The three of us are in the House and we're kind of pushing forward to some degree, but I think the Senate is a little bit more apprehensive to push forward and for a variety of reasons. So Brian, I don't know, or Lily, I don't know if you all want
Sure.
to chime in or.
Well, okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, the Senate president has indicated his opposition, to do this. At this point, had we taken this up in a special session in November, it's one thing. We now, I think, and I know we've got David Naiman from our County Board of Elections here. Let me just throw a couple other things that don't always get discussed because, there is a knee-jerk desire, I think Dave hit it, to want to respond to the Texases and that. But now we're in January. And one of the issues there's a couple of practical issues. We're told and my committee deals with the election law stuff, that if all the lawsuits, which clearly there'll be lawsuits, and by the way, the Supreme Court of Maryland is 5 of the 8 justices are Hogan appointees. We did have an attempt in 2020 to do what's, wanting to be done now. A lower court struck that effort down. And when we did a map that was directed to one of the one district. But right now, if we don't have this all resolved by February 1, we're told that the primaries would likely have to be moved if they're still, and that's a big cost potentially to the state. The second thing is Maryland is a bit unique in that any kind of redistricting effort would have to be reduced to a piece of legislation. In Maryland, you can petition bills to referendum in November. And so the Attorney General came out late with some opinion that said, look, this could go to a November ballot if for example, in this case, the Republican Party were to, and so we would be in this bizarre legal limbo between now and November about a bill that passed. And that's assuming that the lawsuits go nowhere and the court doesn't rewrite their own map and all that kind of stuff. But here's where I will come. So I'm just putting into the mix some kind of some of these practical considerations. But here's the thing is we have a commission chaired by Senator Alsa Brooks, former Attorney General Brian Frosh is on there and others. I'd like to see a map. I mean, like if we're going to do this, I would like to know what are the impacts on Congressional 6, for example. The most competitive district in our state is CD6, currently represented by Congresswoman Delaney. If we're going to do a map, what does it mean for CD6? I mean, I think we have the benefit. We're going to actually do this. I'd like to know what is the implication of the other congressional districts, including the one that's the most competitive. What is the likelihood that that will withstand court scrutiny, including a majority Hogan appointed court? And I think that's kind of where I am right now is if we're going to do it, produce a map commission. I mean, there's a commission that's supposed to come up with a map. But until then, I think we're, kind of spinning around a little bit here, um, playing with some fire that Dave alluded to, is we could end up with a 6-2 map, current 7-1 map. There's a lot of unpredictability here, I would just say, between the courts. Um, Two redistricting go to the court. The high court said, look, you're close to the elections. We're not going to send it back to the General Assembly. We're going to strike down this map and we're going to rewrite our own darn map, which a court could do. That's also part of the risk factor. So I'm not opposed to it, but I'd like to see a map that's in front of me that I can actually vote for that doesn't really
Yeah.
knock some of the other congressional districts.
And that's the
Uh,
big thing, I think, is like, let's look, see what that map may or may not be and get all the facts before we, sorry, stop.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Delegate Chi, Delegate Foley, I don't know if either of you want to jump in on that one. No
Well, I
worries.
think I don't know if I can say any better than my two colleagues have already expressed. It's a complex issue, and I want to keep an open mind. I certainly understand the existential threat to our democracy if we don't fight back, right? And also don't believe we should fight sitting down at a time like this, which has been, articulated by Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo. But on the other hand, I certainly agree with Senator Feldman, which is we don't want to end up hurting ourselves and our
Yeah,
chance
yeah.
of having a good fight, So we have to keep an open mind and really see how this works out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would echo Delegate Chi's comments.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I know that's a difficult one, but it's one that a lot of people, a lot of our precinct officials, and a lot of us in the district feel strongly about as well. So we appreciate you speaking to that. I'm going to go now to the next subject, which was data centers. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's another one where a lot of people had questions about it, particularly in light of the fact that there is a project to have one in Dickerson, and I think one or two maybe in Dickerson. And as I understand it, that's the only place in Montgomery County where there's conversation about there being a data center at this point in time. But the General Assembly's also passed legislation this past session more strictly regulating or at least studying data centers. Um, Thank you. I appreciate the the correction there. But
You
if
mean the
anyone can
study
speak
bill that the
to,
governor, you mean the study bill
Right,
that
I
got
was going to say the
vetoed,
governor
yeah, that was
vetoed it.
vetoed and then
that we
overridden.
He
overrode?
Yeah.
overrode the veto, yeah.
So I appreciate the veto override there, and I appreciate the fact that that is something that impacts us here in District 15 more uniquely than impacts other districts. And so I wonder if you could talk about we don't have the benefits of the study yet, obviously, that study is yet to be conducted, but is the General Assembly considering legislation to regulate data centers now in advance of a study coming out?
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, this again is a national issue, and we're part of a 13 state PJM grid. They've actually held hearings for 3 months to talk about how the 13th state, what is the plan and what's the best way to deal with it from a reliability standpoint. Again, I mentioned earlier, data centers have this huge demand for power, and how do we deal with it, and who pays for all that. Here's where I think we're coming down. Yes, we do. The first thing I have to emphasize is Maryland's not rushing to bring data centers here. Just by comparative, the data center capital of the world, many of you know on the call here, is Virginia. So here's some context. Maryland actually, people think about data centers at the big hyperscale. No, there's actually little data centers all over Maryland right now. We just don't have the big Google, Amazon ones. There are two other ones in Montgomery County beyond this project that's being proposed up in Dickerson. There's two. There's 44 in the entire state of Maryland. By comparison, Virginia has 670. Okay, 70% of all the data centers on Earth are in Virginia. So we're not following that model. We actually passed a bill to study economic impacts, environmental impacts, et cetera, et cetera. So we're taking a slow approach. The key issues, Andrew, come down to, I think, this. Who bears the cost of the infrastructure to do this? What is the impact on this, again, back on this demand for more infrastructure and all that? But it's fundamentally what I think, are coming down. Many states that I've talked to are kind of coalescing around the idea that if you're going to come in with a data center, you bring your own energy generation with you, right? We're not going to let you tap our grid and make the rest of the grid less reliable because you're tapping it, and also, by the way, causing prices to rise. Because another underlying, and this came up earlier, a big thing moving forward is we need to protect our ratepayers at all costs. So the costs are going to be borne in a couple of ways. Number one, we tasked with the bill we passed this session, the Public Service Commission, to come up with a proposed tariff schedule, tax schedule. That's what they've done in Ohio, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, where you're going to pay. You want to do data center business, you're going to have to pay for it. And that's a fund of money that can be utilized to protect ratepayers, to build infrastructure, do some of the economic development and impacts that, data centers potentially can bring to our state. And so this, between the bring your own generation and a tariff tax, particularly these hyperscaler deep pocketed ones, I think that seems to be where I think we're headed. But on the other hand, there's folks that don't want data centers anywhere, in the state of Maryland. I think I'm going to go back to Lilly. They do have economic impacts, tax revenue, et cetera. They do present opportunities, but I think we have to be smart about it and how we do it. But at the end of the day, we got to protect our ratepayers. We can't let them bear the cost of all this.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on data centers there?
There's one other thing with respect to data centers. I think Senator Feldman hit the most important points, but there is another point, and that is there is an environmental impact, particularly as it relates to water. So as part of the study, we also have to also look at the environmental impact of these things. And I think, Senator Feldman mentioned about Virginia and Loudoun County, and I think that they learned the hard way that the environmental effects of these things can also be very difficult to deal with. So there are two aspects to it that we have to really focus on when it comes to data centers.
And then I also say that MDE, our Maryland Department of Environment, has to actually approve permits. So it's not like they kind of do their thing without environmental review. So yes, we have a study to look at the environmental impacts, but ultimately, particularly with respect to water, there's MDE permits involved. In terms of noise, there are local noise ordinances that come into play. So there are some checks and balances in place already on some of those issues, but
And Lily, unless you have something to add, I was going to jump in.
Go ahead, please.
So a couple of parts where I think we need a lot more detail is one is what that economic development in Maryland may or may not look like. I mean, I think there are, that's what part of this study is about. But I think that there is probably a significant number of jobs that are specialist jobs from people coming in out of state. There's going to be some jobs in construction in the state. And then moving forward, once it's up and running, I'm not sure how many real jobs we're talking about. So I think it's important to gather those details to understand exactly what we're doing. Also, in regards to data centers, when it comes into the state of Maryland, it gets really complicated because one of the things that Senator Feldman alluded to, but I think didn't get the chance to expand upon, which is one of the things that worries me is data centers in other states, particularly if there's a data center that's like in Pennsylvania that goes behind the meter. And what that means is that they take the electricity almost directly from the generator. And as we're part of this, the PJM, and we import an extraordinarily large amount of electricity into the state of Maryland from other states. One of the big concerns that I have, and I know myself and Senator Feldman over the summer were in Boston for the National Caucus of State Legislators, and we went to I guess a briefing, and we had a lot of questions from very well educated attorneys on what would happen if a data center came in and wanted to be behind the meter at, let's say, a generating facility like a power plant in Pennsylvania that normally sends power to Maryland. What would that mean for Maryland if that generator came in and was willing to pay more per kilowatt hour or to create a better deal than we had for the ratepayers in Maryland. What guarantees do we have in Maryland that that generator would continue to send electricity to us, or would they turn around and sell it directly to Amazon or Google or whomever? And so these start to become very not only challenging questions and difficult questions, but they also get to be a little bit scary on the question front because since we import so much, like what if they decide they're not going to send it to us? We didn't get, unless I'm wrong, Brian, we never really got a very, very clear answer on what that would mean or wouldn't mean. So that's just another piece of this puzzle that is very um, concerning for us.
Excellent. I do want to jump in real quick because Councilmember Balcom added in the uh, Q&A box something that I think is an important follow-up, and not to jump out of the schedule here, but I think it's an important follow-up where she asked if we are in a regional energy pricing group, how do we protect Maryland ratepayers if other states in the group don't require data centers to come up with their own energy?
Well, that's why, one of our senators, Katie Fry Hester, actually went up to PJM and testified. My task force that Dave is on, we actually went up and met with the FERC commissioners down in DC. This is going to require some regional collaboration with amongst the 13 PJM states so that that doesn't happen. I mean, to Dave's point, right now we're part of this legal compact. I'm told that it's likely illegal for the state of Pennsylvania to, to do what we were kind of concerned about that happening. But, I don't know 100% that's fire safe. But I think at the end of the day, it's the 13 states why there's been these proceedings at PJM so we can come coalesce around a common 13 state, or even if it's not 13, if it's just us, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, I've been doing monthly meetings with the chair of the Energy Committee in New Jersey, in Delaware. We've had some meetings with, again, New Jersey, with Pennsylvania. And so I think this is going to require some multi-state collaboration ultimately. I think that's the only way this works.
Oh, Andrew,
I'm
you're muted.
talking and I'm muted. Can't do that as the moderator. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you touching on that issue. I know it's one that I have concerns about, that everybody here has concerns about, because it is something that impacts us directly in major ways. I want to move on to another adjacent question related to energy. This one was actually specifically asked of Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo. So this one is thrown right at you. And will you give us an update on what the state can do to take advantage of new energy and grid technologies?
Sure. So, a couple of years ago, Senator Feldman and I, Chair Feldman and I, put in a bill called the Drive Act, which allows for people to have create their own power plants. It's called a virtual or VPP, virtual power plant. So you can put solar on your roof, solar in your field. You can generate your own electricity. You can also store it in batteries, and then you can sell it back or push it back to the grid. Now, the Public Service Commission is right now kind of finishing up all the regulations on that, which will allow every Marylander that wants to, that can afford to, from an entrepreneurial perspective or from an environmental perspective or from a climate change perspective, whatever perspective they want, can create their own power plant, and then they can sell the electricity back on the grid when there is a big demand, which helps the grid. It helps the decentralization of power and storage, and it helps us to rely less on other states. So that's one piece that's going to affect now as we speak. I think there's also some technologies that are available like line reconductoring. Line reconductoring is kind of modernizing the transmission lines, the big transmission lines, so they can take more electricity using more modern lines. Senator Feldman and I, we saw it when we had heard about it before, but when we were down in DC, I think they were passing around that big line. And it's a different core inside the line, which allows anywhere from 25 to 35% more electricity to go down the same, kind of line. That's expensive, no doubt, but being able to transfer more electricity, I think is a big advantage than just building new generation. So if we can transfer more, then maybe we don't have to build as much transmission or as much generation, depending on the time of day, outside temperatures. There's a lot of pieces to that. There's also the piece of being able to monitor the outside temperature, the temperature of the lines, which I think helps to figure out, what we can transmit, what we can't. But I think there's probably some low-hanging fruit there. It's just really more expensive to replace old line with new line than it is to just replace new technology line with new transmission. So there's more than a couple of pieces. There's more than a couple pieces there, and I will leave it there.
Can I just
Right.
add that, one of
Yeah,
the,
go ahead.
it's not really new technology, but it's clean energy, is the wind technology. We did pass a pretty ambitious wind bill several years ago to get wind offshore. And we heard nothing but complaints about how the view of Ocean City is going to be wrecked because of these tiny little windmills that are going to be 11 miles off the coast. But the federal government has come in and has stopped that in its tracks. And I think that a big part of us going forward in technology. I mean, there's solar and there are things that Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo talked about that can make, that can enhance our power grid. But wind is a big one, and we have to get that back on track. We have to be able to access wind power. I think in Maryland, I think that's a big part of the puzzle of us generating our own electricity.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the addition there. Anyone else want to jump in on clean energy technology before we move to the next subject?
Can I just add one thing to Linda's
Yeah.
point? The project, U.S. wind project off Ocean City would have powered 718,000 homes on the Eastern Shore. And the Trump administration, even though it had been approved under Biden, kind of shut it down. I mean, it really makes no sense. The other thing about that is when we passed the bill, it was about manufacturing hub. Potentially, Maryland could be the manufacturing hub for wind turbines on the entire East Coast. That's now not going to happen. So there's an economic development, manufacturing component, not just energy. And then the final point Dave mentioned, the demand response is also part of the equation. It's not all about generation. The bill that Dave mentioned for a few years ago, it's also incentivizing people to use their power at times when it's not peak. It's called time of use rates. That was also part of the bill. And then even on data centers, Delegate Charkoudian has a bill that would basically say, look, you data centers, you want to operate here, we're going to incentivize you to do your business in non-peak periods, right? So playing on the demand side of things is as important as figuring out how to do more generation. So I just really that's an important point moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you for adding that. I know the wind is also a particularly large topic given the Trump administration's interjections into our local economy right now. So appreciate that addition. I want to recognize we got like 5 minutes before we move into closing statements and a lot of additional questions. So we will not get through all the questions. I apologize if folks have questions that are not answered tonight. Feel free to shoot us an email and we will pass them along to your state legislators for you. But I'm going to keep going through the questions in the 5 minutes we have, and then we'll have an opportunity during closing statements for the legislators to address things that they feel like were not addressed earlier. We had two questions related to education. One was an update on the cell phone policy bill. I know Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo, you would introduce one of those bills in a previous session. I think there were a couple of versions of it that bounced around. But I don't know if you want to take a crack at it, if anyone else wants to take a crack at it. What's the status of the changing cell phone policies in the state of Maryland?
So unless somebody knows more, I'll take a brief crack. I put in a bill, and there were six other bills from other folks. Some of those bills were from people on the Ways and Means Committee, the Committee of Jurisdiction for cell phones. So I know that I think it was Delegate Chow Wu's bill that we actually passed. It went over to the Senate. I'm not sure. I think it died over there. Senator Feldman may or may not recall that particular one. So I'm not sure where the official state policy is. But I think on the county level, I had talked with the superintendent on numerous occasions that was very thankful for just putting the bill in and getting that conversation really started. I think the counties come up with their own policy. I don't recall all the specifics of it, but if anybody particularly wants to know, I'm happy to dig into it and get back to them on exactly what that policy has to do. But I think it's not a no phone, no cell bell to bell. It's more like, you can't have them in the classrooms, but you can have them between classes and during lunch. I don't know where they finally came down on that, but that was Montgomery County policy. That's not statewide. I don't know what the current statewide policy is, but some of the other counties have done their own things, their own policies, and gone their own separate way.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to add anything about cell phones in schools? All right, not seeing any takers, no worries. I'm going to move on to another one on immigration. This is largely a federal issue, but I understand that there have been a number of efforts at the state level to protect our immigrant neighbors in light of ICE continuing or horrific raids in our community. I wondered if any of you could speak to some of the work that the General Assembly is doing to protect immigrants in our
I
community.
know that there's going to be a masking bill to prohibit law enforcement from wearing masks. Excuse me, I know that that bill is coming in. I think there's some question about whether uh, we can direct federal law enforcement officials to do that, but we're going to try. Excuse me. I think also um, there's going to be a bill to prohibit cooperation. Excuse me, 520, what's that
Oh,
law?
the
287G.
27 Gs.
Uh,
Yeah, the
Two
287G.
287 Gs.
287Gs, yeah.
287G.
Yeah, Delegate Williams has a 287G bill that she's bringing in to prohibit 287G agreements. So I think those are going to be two major um, immigration protection issues that are going to come up in the General Assembly. I don't know what else is out there, but maybe my colleagues do.
The only thing that I would add, the one piece on that masking bill, which I've had some conversations with the current chair of the Latino caucus is, you know, what is our goal here? Because it seems to me like most of what's going on are these are federal agencies that are doing the masks. And so what ability do local and state law enforcement agencies have in enforcing federal policy? And while I'm not an attorney, as I stated previously on this call, I suspect probably none. But I don't know that for sure. So that's one piece of it. And it seems to me that a lot of the local and state law enforcement agencies around the country are, I would say, are more on our side. Like they get that this is probably not a great policy. It's the feds. It's the kind of transition to this kind of brown shirt fascism that is really, really concerning. And I'm not sure that this bill addresses that. Maybe it does. I guess we'll find out.
Right. Thank you so much for speaking to that. I want to see if I can get one more question in before we move to closing statements. And this is going to be an amalgamation of a couple of different questions that were submitted in advance. It has to do with messaging and outreach. So I wonder if you could each speak to what we as Democrats and you as elected officials who represent our community can do to better reach out to communities who are underrepresented or feel that they haven't been spoken to, and really refine our message in advance of the upcoming election.
Well, I'll
And I
start.
can pick someone. Yes, thank you so much, Delegate Chi.
Yeah, I can start. I did spend some good amount of time thinking, reflecting, and talking about that subject that I feel very strongly about, because I had to do that in my 2018 election when I had to not only explain how close the primary system works, but convince people to get off the fence and register as a Democrat because of what a Democratic Party stood for. But the burden should not fall on individual, candidates. I think as a party, as a system, we can do better in terms of building a bigger tent, in terms of getting our messages across to the people who are not familiar with our American democracy system, whether they are from other states or other countries or with the Maryland election system. So we have all kinds of work to do at multiple levels. But when it comes to a message, I think the message comes in two ways. One is what you say and how you explain to people in their language. I'm not talking about like a Spanish or Chinese kind of language, but in a way they understand that they can relate to, right? In the working class communities can relate to certain messages instead of coming across as like elitist. How dare you don't understand this kind of issue? How come you're not on our side on this issue? We come across as very judgmental sometimes when it comes to democratic values. So I think we need to be very careful about things like that. There are a lot of minority communities. The more diverse they are, the more likely they are culturally conservative, right? Because of their different religions and different languages they they speak and different upbringings from different cultures. So I think we need to adopt that kind of cultural competency in translating our platforms in a way that people can relate to and understand. And the other thing is how we can focus on bread and butter issues. I'm always, very upset when I think about how we inadvertently become a party that is perceived as anti-business when so much of our business ownership is by minorities and immigrants, especially the immigrant community. They oftentimes have to start their own business just to create a job for themselves because they're not very competitive in the English speaking job market, right? And so we become so insensitive to that community, and we lose a lot of these people who actually voted for Trump. I have friends, whether they are English proficient or with PhDs, who voted for Trump, right? Because they believe he stood for a strong America and economic prosperity and what's possible and all of that. And that's a failure, collective failure of the Democratic Party that is working so hard to fight for the underdogs, for the newcomers, for the people, who that does not belong to the dominant culture. So I think there's a whole lot of work we can do by focusing on what's appealing to most people's bread and butter issues, right? By breaking it down into the kind of language that people can relate to and understand, and by using ethnic social media that people where people actually are in terms of channeling the information. So it's not just the message, but it's also target audience and target channels of communication. All of that.
Just to add, I think what Delegate Chi said is right. It's not just the message, it's also the medium. The medium is the message, McLuhan said, right? So, um, but in addition to that, I think from my point of view, I'll speak only for myself here, as a person who came out of the communications industry, it's not my job as a legislator, to really, as a politician, I need to have a message and we need to be delivering a message, but that's your job, right? It's the party's job to figure out what the messaging is for the party. I think from our point of view, we have done a lot of really good things in the Maryland legislature, and we have a lot of really good goals going forward, as you heard here today. To protect us, to make sure that Marylanders are taken care of. And I'll just go to one example. Our speaker got a bill passed last year that said that vaccinations in Maryland have to be covered by insurance if they were approved by the CDC as of December 31, 2024. So to me, you talk about messaging, to just tell people you can get your vaccinations in Maryland without putting money out of your pocket. Why? Because we have smart people in our General Assembly who figured out how to take care of that problem, who proactively worked on that. Now, I'm not saying we're perfect and that we fix every problem, but we do live in a state where, number one, we can get things done. And number two, we are looking out for the people in our state. We're not like looking out for the billionaires and we are addressing bread and butter issues. Are we perfect? No, but we do, but they're we here in Maryland, we are so much better off than they are, than other parts of the country where they're suffering from some of these policies that have been put in place. So yes, I think we need a message, but I want our work to speak for us in the General Assembly. That's what I want.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I don't know if Senator Feldman or
Well,
Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo want to jump in.
I agree with both Linda and Lily. The one thing, Linda and I come from Pittsburgh. Okay, I know working class city, manufacturing city.
Sorry about that.
that's where they make.
Steelers, go, yeah. Okay.
And so, a lot of my view on this issue, on this question, really shaped by where we came from, and for whatever the reason, at some point, the Democratic Party was unable to speak to that Southwest Pennsylvania working class voter, and they lost him. I mean, for whatever the reason, and we can talk a little bit about that, but the messaging was that we're a part of um, the coastal elites, and you guys in the Midwest, and from these, and a certain arrogance factor I think had crept in over time, which is if you voted for Donald Trump, you're dumb. The smart people vote Democrat, or there's a little undertone to it. Nobody actually says that. And so I think if you're, working class, maybe you didn't go to have all these fancy degrees from all these fancy schools, and et cetera, et cetera, you're kind of looked at, you feel like this is a party that's not talking to me or speaking to me or respecting me. And I think you saw backlash. And that's what we need to get because Linda says on the issues, we're actually very much in tune with working class America, but for whatever, that's not what working class America is hearing. They're not worried about policies. It's culture issues. There's other issues. So I think we need to get back and recalibrate to a party that can speak to working class, middle class America. It's the bread and butter issues, some of the things both Lily and Linda talked to. I think that's the key, really the key, because we have the issues. It's just somehow the tone is not quite there, or maybe our messengers aren't quite the right messengers.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you want to add anything, Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo. Um,
I think my colleagues did a very good job.
Perfect. I'll just say this is as much a question for us on the Central Committee and at the party as it is for them. And several of you asked it, and I don't want to take up the time that we have to hear from them to answer it on behalf of the party. So I'm not going to waste everyone's time with it. But we have had a number of listening sessions, including one in District 15. We're going to have another one in District 15. The state has had a number of listening sessions. And we are working harder to listen and learn from our communities and really show how we're fighting for bread and butter. Democrats all up and down the ballot are fighting for bread and butter issues, as Delegate Chi mentioned, that folks care about the kitchen table issues. I know affordability is the watchword of the day. And that's something that we are keenly interested in pushing our message out about.
Can I
But I do
say,
want to
oh,
go,
sorry. Can I say
yeah,
one
just
more
30
thing?
seconds, and then I'll go to
Okay, real
closing
quick.
statements.
Don't forget, it's really important that we do what we can. We're kind of late to this, but we need to make sure that we have credible local sources of information. And that doesn't mean the internet or social media. That means the Baltimore Banner. That means, credible local news sources. Because if we don't do that, whatever the message is, it doesn't matter. It won't get out.
Thank you. I'm going to go now to closing statements. I think I'll go in reverse from how we started at the beginning. We'll go Delegate Foley, Delegate Chi, Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo, Senator Feldman to give you the closing words. But we'll do that, and then Kathy will give brief closing remarks, and I'll thank you all for coming.
Well, I want to again, I just want to really quickly thank everybody for being here. I want to thank again the great District 15 caucus, Kathy and your crew for putting this together as you always do, and for helping us be so effective in Annapolis. Andrew, I want to thank you for moderating this. You did a terrific job. And I also want to thank my colleagues for all the hard work that they do every day. And not just when we're in Annapolis, but when we're back here in District 15. I am really proud and honored to represent District 15 in the Maryland General Assembly. I think we have a great district, and it's a lot of it's also it's very rewarding to do that, to represent you all. It's also fun to work in a district that has so much diversity. So thank you for everything, and Happy New Year, everybody.
And
Well,
Delegate Chi.
thank you. I want to say this is going to be an extraordinary session, not only because it's an election year, but we know the challenges ahead at the federal, state, and local levels. The communities are hurting and some are very scared. So we have a lot of work to do to hold our communities together and to prioritize our challenges in order to make it work with our limited resources. So your input and your ideas will be very important. I hope you will continue to be engaged. On the other hand, I am excited that all three of us delegates are not only serving on important committees with broad scopes of portfolio, but also each of us chairs important subcommittees with a great impact on our everyday life, along with our senator. I'm very proud to be part of District 15 team, not only the legislative team, but the Democratic caucus team that is doing tremendous work. in getting the messages out, getting people involved year round. And I don't think we could be nearly as effective as legislators without your engagement and support, and also holding us accountable at the same time. So thank you.
Too much, Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo.
Yes, I think the big thank yous go all the way around to Andrew, Kathy, everybody on the call, everybody in the caucus, to my team. Again, the best team in the General Assembly. Um, Look, I think it's important to just say we have a lot of challenges, a lot of changes, new subject matter. The new speaker has created a whole new committee within the House of Delegates that hasn't been done in, I don't know, probably more than 20 years. So we're having a seventh committee. That means that the work in the House and the Senate is getting more complicated. The subject matter is more complicated, which means we need more people to drill down and focus and become a little bit more of subject matter experts, a little more SMEs than in the past because the subject matter has become so complicated. We have massive budget challenges going forward, but I think that while we have all these challenges, we have a lot of talent in place to surmount and address those challenges, not only talent throughout the entire General Assembly and the state, but on this team and moving forward, I look forward to like really jumping in. It's going to be a tough year. And I think also what Delegate Chi said, it's a tough year going into an election cycle. So from a Democrat perspective or a Democratic caucus perspective and party perspective, we have a lot of challenges around messaging, around the budget, around all kinds of things. But I'm confident that we're going to work our way through this budget cycle and this year, just as we have in the past. And I can't think of a better district to represent, and I can't think of a better team to go into it with. So I'll leave it there. Thank you again, everyone.
Uh,
Thank you. And Senator Feldman.
well, I'm tempted to say ditto, ditto, ditto. The only thing I would add is I think my committee, again, will have the most bills of any committee in the General Assembly: energy, environment, affordable housing, education. But I also think that most of the heavy lifting will be on bills that go to the two committees that Lily, Linda, and Dave serve on. And so this is the first opportunity I've had to actually go through a session where my three colleagues are going to be chairing important subcommittees that feed into my committee over in the Senate. So there's some synergy that really hasn't existed quite like this in the first 3 years of this term, and I'm super excited to collaborate with all three of them on all these super important issues. So on that bright note, Happy New Year to everybody, and thank you for the invite.
Thank you very much. And I will go to Kathy for some closing remarks. But on behalf of myself, thank you very much.
So thank you to our D15 state legislators, our moderator, Andrew Sondry, and all who attended. If you want to get involved with our D15 caucus activities, we have a website, d15democrats.org, and a volunteer form. Also, be sure to subscribe if you haven't to the MCDCC or the Montgomery County Democratic Party newsletter, which is at mcdcc.org/newsletter. And thank you, everybody, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year,
Thank
everyone. Thank you
you.
all so much.